Hi, folks. Uh, Great to have you with us today. This is going to be a little longer than a typical video we do, but I really want to talk a little bit about some of the pain that I guess I'm feeling, that you're feeling. Just the other day I was at the grocery store and I see somebody, one of our parishioners, and says, "Oh, great to see you, Father, again." And I'm like, "Oh man, I don't get to see my parishioners. That's I don't get to. You may be able to see me if you're watching in our live stream, but I don't get to see you, and I find it so painful. I miss you all. I miss I miss seeing new faces. I miss seeing all those people who've joined us in our live stream, and it's really difficult to me to not be able to be with you. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that reality and what the mass is, because this is really getting down to the heart of what that is. And so I want to take some time to do that with you today. And I'm really happy to have an old friend of mine. Well, we're both old, so that's no insult to him. We're but Paul Donovan, who's Paul is the newest member of the team at Divine Renovation, a ministry that we work closely with. Paul is also a Montrealer. And part of that work at Divine Renovation means that he's going to be working with us as a strategic advisor in that role. And so we're really pleased to have him with us. Many of you may remember him as the former president of Loyola High School. And thanks very much for joining with us, Paul.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to be part of the work that you're doing. I've been watching and been so impressed with the life that we're seeing in your parish, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is going to be fun, and it's not going to be as much fun as when we got gathered together around a poker table and would take each other's money and things like that we used to do. But
For many years, but that's where we learn strategy.
yeah. This strategy. That's how you learn how to read people, how to understand human dynamics. How
Lots
you
of great skills come from poker.
yeah. This, that's keep telling yourself that. The Paul, thanks very much for joining with us. Let's get into this discussion around the Mass and what it means for us.
So I just right off the bat, I think your little introduction was good for me to hear, because we often think with all the stuff that's going on, how we feel, how what we hope for, and that kind of stuff, and I don't think I've ever really thought about how the priests are feeling. And like you said, we get to see you in the live stream, but you're not getting that the gathering of your people, which is
Was the highlight of my week.
exactly. So there are so many different challenges that so many people are facing depending on their circumstances, and it makes it really hard. But I think what's really interesting in all of this, and it's one of the things that I think throughout the history of the church, you see when difficulties come around, they become the opportunity for reflection on the meaning of those things, and that's in all the councils. It's all sorts of things where challenges make for a deeper sense of what it is we believe, and why we do the things that we do. So it might be a good idea, maybe, if you could just talk a little bit about the way you see, where you understand the whole theology of what the Mass is and why we come together, why we have the duty to be at Mass on Sundays in the Catholic Church.
The duty.
The duty.
Yeah. I don't. But yeah, we do have this Sunday obligation to come to Mass, not an obligation to receive the Eucharist, but an obligation to come to Mass. Normally, that's been suspended during this time. But I think that's been there by the Church, because they want the community of they want the people of God to come together and worship God as His people, as one. The to me, the Mass is this unifying um, action of the Church, this unifying action of the Church here on earth, the Church of all our forefathers, all of our those personal saints that you have had, those people who've been super important and super, like, holy people who've helped you along in your life in the past, who may have passed along and hopefully are in heaven, or and so it's coming together with all of those people, with the church in heaven, the people of God in heaven, the people of God here on earth, the people in awaiting heaven and purgatory, all of us coming together around the throne of God to worship God with the Lamb and to receive the Lamb, to be united to the Lamb, Jesus Christ, in that moment, in that uh, in this united this uniting of heaven and earth, not just
Yeah.
this uniting of people together.
Yeah, and it's funny, I've heard that the expression of the veil between heaven and earth is thinnest at Mass, because that, sacraments in general are that joining of heaven and earth, and at the Mass especially this. But I like the perspective of thinking, again, we often will think of that as just me and God, but it isn't just me and God. It's not even me and the people that are here, but it's the whole church, which is all the people that have gone before us as well, that are all together. That's a strong sense of what it is to be church, to be a community.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also, I mean, there's this, there's a sacrament of the Eucharist that is vital to that, to our lives, to as Christians. And the idea of the sacrament is that it's a physical sign of God's grace in our lives. Um, it isn't just receiving Jesus in the Eucharist for so that he's so I get to possess him. In a sense, it's a way that God's grace comes into our lives, so that we know God's grace comes into our lives in a very tangible, real way. But it comes into our lives to spill out from it too. Like it isn't to transform us, to spill out to us, so it is. There is this outward focus even to a sacrament, like that I think is important for us to remember too.
So in the time when we're not necessarily able to receive the Eucharist every Sunday, um, and obviously that you mentioned that the obligation is lifted, but what do we do? How do we as a community sort of deal with the idea of, well, if this is the way God has chosen to give us His grace, how do we deal with that in the circumstances where we're not maybe able to receive every week? How do we handle that? How do we deal with that as individuals and as a community?
I think it's changing how we're doing that, right?
Mm.
And change is always painful, and it always comes with letting go and of certain things. But it's one of the things, and I know it's painful. It's painful for me, as I said at the beginning, like not being able to join with my friends, with my brothers and sisters in the Mass on Sundays. But I know it's painful when we've been offering communion after Mass for the past little while. I've seen it in tears that people have shed as they come to receive the sacrament after however many months, because they're, even when we were open to a larger number than we are now, they were still, leery of of coming back into inside of a building in general, and coming back into the church. And so it's been, then I see the tears that they shed over that. I see the also the tears of, like, we just had some first communion masses, like, and I see the tears of joy as these kids who've been preparing for so long. Actually, we actually had kids really welling up, actually receiving the sacrament for the first time. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see that 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 the not the pain of it isn't beautiful. It's
Yeah.
to see people finally being able to receive Christ in the Eucharist, and I recognize that it's painful for people to have to go to the lengths that we are forced to go to in order to enter into to come to Mass. Like that there's big hurdles now that, in some ways for people who long to be able to come and celebrate in person and be able to receive Christ in the Eucharist in the context of the Mass. Like that's and I know it's painful for them as well. It's like it's and we have to make we have to work within certain parameters. Some of them imposed by the government, some of them parameters set by the diocese and things like that. But those are some of the things that we have to work. We have to make choices within those parameters.
So different parishes have made different choices in terms of how they're dealing with it. Again, I think all within the parameters that have been set. Some are choosing to, do multiple masses with either because they have multiple priests or one priest doing many masses with a few people at each mass. Others have done, and I think the value of the live stream that St. Ignatius has put together and the number of people that are benefiting from it is another way. What sort of goes into the idea of how you prioritize the choices that are being made and within the constraints that are given to you by the diocese?
Well, some of the we have to operate within those things, and we make choices, and they're legitimate choices that other parishes are making.
Yeah.
I think they're legitimate choices that we're making as well. And we're, without sounding too crass, sometimes it's like we're just trying to choose the least worst option for us. Like it's sort of there's no great option. The perfect thing would be to be able to if you weren't even is to not be bound by time and space even, and just be able to worship actually with the whole church universal across the world coming together as one. Like if we weren't bound by time and space, we have those constraints that we have to deal with in any circumstance. And for us, the choice we've made is to really emphasize the live stream and having people come together around that a communal celebration of one uh, Eucharistic celebration, even if it means that they're doing so virtually. We recognize that isolation is such a big factor in what this pandemic has wrought in our society, and the isolation that people are feeling, but means that we want to find ways to break through that. And this, and we realize also in doing this live stream that there be people who've been homebound and shut-ins and sick for years who haven't been able to join us at St. Ignatius. They've been watching TV, like they might have watched Mass on TV or something in the past, or maybe not able to at all. But now with our live stream, they're able to actually worship in their spiritual home, in a sense, like back at the place that has meant so much to them over the years, and that's an added thing. But that choice we make is a deliberate one to really emphasize the one mass that we are really like putting all our effort into, and making that coming together as a community, hearing one message as a community, and and celebrating the the, the as the people of God at once is what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and that again is where you talk about the idea of the good that comes from even the tough situations, and you mentioned the shut-ins that even before the pandemic weren't able to go and now have some kind of an opportunity, and that's a growth in a way that can come out of the difficulties that are there. And certainly, I can tell you that the live streaming that you guys have done and other parishes have done them as well, but they've just been a real blessing for people in throughout this pandemic, of feeling that they're part of a community and not alone. And the isolation is probably the most difficult thing in the whole thing. So that sort of brings up even the idea of the future, right? So we just heard that there's another 28 days of isolation in our red zones and that sort of thing, and we don't know how long it's going to go. So it's got to be hard to plan out what's coming. So I don't know when you're looking at the future and the holidays and all that stuff that's coming out, how are you planning for keeping the community strong and being giving people access to the sacrament as much as you possibly can?
Well, we recognize that Christ in the Eucharist is such a powerful healing instrument for people, a source of grace for people, and strength in this time as well. And so we have tried to emphasize the idea that of making that available, even though we don't have a multiplicity of masses, like making the sacrament like available through in the Eucharist available to people outside of Mass at other times. It's historically that the Eucharist outside of Mass has been meant for the sick and the homebound, and we are. I think everyone is suffering at this
Mm.
moment. Everyone is suffering in some ways, whether it's economic uncertainty, whether it's the isolation, the suffering. Marriages are suffering at these moments. The suffering because you don't know what's happening with your kids, if they're going to be able to go to school tomorrow or not. Um, and so we think Christ in the Eucharist is matters to people in those moments. So we try and work that in. As we look forward to the holidays, this is something we're working through at the moment, and I think those principles that we talked about honoring the communal celebration of the liturgy is coming together is even virtually is going to be what we're emphasizing. We're operating under the principle that right now what we're living right now is what we're going to be living at Christmas.
Right.
That may not be the case, so we may have to make some adjustments. But right now, as we plan this out, that's the operating principle that's the paradigm that we're in at this moment is trying to work within. But we want to keep the Sabbath holy. We want to keep Christmas holy. We want to keep Advent holy for you, and we want to figure out new ways to do that for people. And we want to keep. We want to honor all of these things in what they've meant in people's lives up to now, and helping them find new ways to live them out because if we're in this state when we get to Christmas, you're not going to be able to visit with all your family and friends and have the office parties and all that sort of stuff that you normally would have been doing. And so having to find you're going to have to that's going to be painful and letting that some of that go, but you're also going to have find new ways to celebrate this season, and we want to help be part of that, I guess.
I guess the other thing that occurs to me, you talk about there's physical presence and physical celebration in the community, and then we talk about virtual, which is Zoom and the way you and I are meeting right now. But there's also a spiritual connection that I think has really been emphasized during the pandemic. And one of the thoughts that occurred to me, I remember being at Mass on a Sunday when I could go, and it was only 25 people that were able to be there, and the thought that. The idea that the grace that I'm receiving by being present at Mass is not intended only for me, but is something that actually can be of benefit to people who couldn't be there. And that there's a spiritual connection that we make as a community as well, where the graces that are received by one can be for the benefit of others. There's a little part in the Mass that just reminded me of that. And I heard it one Sunday and it just struck me because it's something you say every Sunday. But it's the idea of saying, look not on our sins, but on the faith of your church. And it sort of struck me that the faith that one person has is not only something that's beneficial to them, but is something that actually remediates against the sin and the struggles that everybody else has as well. That's even more true as we start to think about the people that can attend Mass now and those that can't. That we can be channels of the grace that we receive.
That's interesting. As you were saying that, I thought you were going to say at the end of Mass when it says "Go forth," the Mass is like "Ite missa est." In Latin, it was like we actually took Latin back in the old days at Loyola High School. So, but it's like it's that going forth of it. But it's interesting you're bringing up that just before the sign of peace and just before we enter into the communion, the time of communion, is that idea that we're going to receive something. If you're physically present there, you're going to receive that, but it isn't just for you. Like it is meant to be a channel of grace, and even virtually, if you're receiving Christ in the word that you're hearing, in the virtual assembly of people, in those things, that it isn't simply for you. Like take joy in that. Take revel in that you're receiving that grace, but also then it is meant to be you're meant to be that channel of that for other people as well. It's interesting to me that it's sort of like in a sense, we ask people at the beginning of Mass all through these pandemics, hey, bring somebody to prayer. At the beginning of Mass, somebody who's in isolation, and I'll make a suggestion every week about somebody, if they're somebody who's sick or somebody who's lost their job or whatever it is. But it's not just about bringing them to prayer in that moment, but then being able to be the conduit of the grace after that you've received in that Mass.
Yeah.
And like you said, that remediation is that's an interesting concept.
And again, that for me is, it's part of the reflection that comes in the difficult times that we face, and maybe that's our attitude, right? It's got to be this one of trying to say, well, where is God's grace in the middle of all of this, instead of looking at all the things that are difficult and all the things that bother us.
We've lost so much, but there's still, it doesn't mean that God isn't operating in this thing. Where are we going to be able to find Him and discover new ways of experiencing Him in this moment, and it's
And hopefully, like with the Eucharist, is deepening our experience of what we had. That it becomes, so suddenly the meaning becomes much more obvious to us because of the difficulties that we're in. So
yeah. Anyway, I want to thank you very much for spending some time with us and talking this through. It makes I think for me it makes, I love having these conversations. I look forward to many more with you as we go forward, and it's really been a pleasure to have you with us here.
well, thanks for sharing your insights and giving us a little bit of opening our eyes a little bit to all of the things that go on and all the things that are involved in this whole process. So much appreciated. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Goodbye,
Thanks.
folks. Thanks.